In this module, we're going to look at security in the Windows 10 operating system. So managing device security. In this first section, we're going to focus on network security, essentially configuring the Windows firewall, as well as providing malware protection using Windows Defender. And that's going to help to protect us against network-based threats. Then we'll look at configuring local security on the machine, in the form of security policies, and then moving on to data security. Data security is going to be through BitLocker. It's going to be through EFS. It's how are we going to protect the data? Well, we're typically going to protect the data by providing encryption of some form. And then we'll go configuring device security. We're going to be looking at user account control in that section and how it is used to protect the system from unwanted executable code. But we're going to start in this first section about configuring network security. And we'll deal with two things specifically, the firewall and Windows Defender. Network threats do abound in today's environments. You have threats that are active network threats, such as denial of service attacks, attempts to hack into a system via port scans. You also have malware. Now, it's not a network-based threat. It's more of a software-based threat. But often this software allows then unauthorized network connectivity to or from a machine. And so even though we got systems that are on an internal network, they're typically connected to the internet. We've got users using email. We've got users browsing the web and possibly downloading files and installing programs. And so security's got to be on the mind of everybody. Even if you're not a quote-unquote security professional, security is really the job of every user in the organization. And so it's our goal to be able to configure Windows 10 so that it is configured in the most secure manner possible. By doing so, we can help to mitigate some of these threats. Now, mind you, a lot of these network threats, they should be blocked by a perimeter firewall. So you might be wondering, well, why do we need a host firewall? Why do we need a firewall on the operating system? And the reason is because all your threats don't come from the outside. Some threats will come internally. Some threats come in the form of malware that then allows connections to the machine. Some threats come from a disgruntled employee or an IT person who's just got a grudge and they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing on the internal network. And then on top of that, your external defense is just that. It's an external defense, and people can potentially get through it. And if they get through it and there's no other level of defense, then we've been breached, essentially. And so typically the way to handle security is to use a multi-layered approach that's often called a defense in-depth model. And so that just means we're going to implement controls at various levels so that if the controls and protection mechanisms at one level are breached, we still have additional levels of protection. So we'll start with the Windows firewall. The Windows firewall was originally introduced way back in XP Service Pack 2, and at that point it really wasn't very good. It got a significant overhaul in Windows Vista and then a few more enhancements in Windows 7, and it's largely unchanged from that point. The Windows 10 operating system has this firewall. It is turned on by default. We call it a host-based firewall because it's installed on the operating system. And so it provides protection to the operating system from the outside as well as from programs on the system itself, because you got a program that installs and then tries to make network connections, and you are alerted to that fact. So some of the features and benefits: it thwarts common attacks automatically, things like denial of service, things like port scans that would be used to identify running services on a machine. Those are automatically going to be blocked. It is protecting both outgoing and incoming traffic. That was a big difference between the firewall in Vista and the original version in XP Service Pack 2. XP Service Pack 2, it only blocked incoming. So if you got some malicious software on your machine, you'd have no way of knowing that it was making connections out. The problem with that is if it's making a connection out, then it's going to automatically allow the connection back in because it's as if it was requested by you. So this was a big deal. Easy configuration using Control Panel. You also have advanced configuration available with the Windows Firewall with advanced security. Automatic notifications when information or when programs are blocked or a program needs access. It's also aware of network profiles. So the private, the public, the domain, when you set up rules, they are going to be rules that persist for a particular profile. Also, we have integration with IPsec. Now, we briefly mentioned that in conjunction with VPNs. That is typically where IPsec is used, but it can also be used in what's called transport mode, and that just means it's used on the internal network. It is an additional protective mechanism encrypting and authenticating network traffic. Prior to Windows Vista, this was totally separate from the firewall. So you needed firewall rules to allow the traffic. You had IPsec rules that would, or policies that would not allow it, but they would make sure it was secure. Well, now it's all been integrated into one place. There's still two separate kinds of rules, but they're implemented in one place, and so it makes it simpler to deal with. The basic configuration that you have in the control panel is just that. It's basic, but at the same time, it's probably all that you'll need in many cases. You can enable or disable the firewall if you want. We can configure the notifications. Is it going to automatically notify when it blocks traffic or when it allows? And then I can allow programs. I can say that I want to allow a program or app through the firewall, and I can browse for that program or app and allow it. The Windows Firewall with Advanced Security is going to give complete configuration of the firewall. We'll have a separate set of inbound rules and outbound rules, and it's far more detailed. In fact, sometimes it's more detailed to a fault, and that's why I said in a lot of cases you can just stick with the basic configuration. A basic rule out in Control Panel often is associated with 5 or 6 actual rules when you look at it with the Advanced Security snap-in. Those are inbound and outbound rules, and then the IPsec rules are referred to as connection security rules. Those can be created and maintained using this MMC snap-in. The 3 network profiles relate to a few different things. They relate to discovery settings and sharing settings, but they also relate to the firewall rules. When you create a firewall rule or enable a firewall rule, you specifically pick which profile it's going to be associated with. So if you only want a rule that's in place for public networks, we can do that. We can allow traffic in a private or domain network setting, but disallow it in a public network setting. And remember, the profile is chosen when you initially connect to the network. You have to decide at that point what type of network it's going to be, and your choices are public or private. That does not apply to the domain profile type. You'll automatically have the domain profile type chosen for you if you're A, a member of the domain, and B, connected to that domain's network. So let's take a look at the configuration of the firewall. We'll start in Control Panel. Under System and Security, you've got the Windows Firewall here. Okay, notice I'm connected to a private network. I'm not connected to guest or public networks, but this is just showing me the settings, the notifications, and whether incoming connections are allowed. And so it is blocking all connections to apps that are not on the list of allowed applications. On the incoming side, if you want to change notification settings, you can click that. And you can tell, I want to be notified when the firewall blocks a new app. You could say block all incoming connections, including those in the list of allowed apps. That's clearly not something that we would normally do, but if you have some sort of breach or virus outbreak, you might do that. And we definitely don't want to turn off the firewall. Microsoft's done a good job at tweaking the firewall. It really does work very well, and it provides an important added level of protection. The restore defaults is just a quick way to restore all the defaults for the firewall if you need to. Allow an app or feature through the firewall. Okay, so at this point, we would just allow another app. We can hit browse. It's just going to take me to my, it's taking me to System 32. I can go up to Program Files, and then I can choose certain applications that I want to allow access. So, for instance, if it's you got to go find the actual executable. Okay, and so I don't have one specifically. Let's go with SolarWinds, which is my Dameware. Okay, so the Dameware control, remote control, I double click it. That's what I want to allow. Add it, and then we can choose whether it's private, allowed with private or public. I don't have the domain checkboxes because this machine is not a member of a domain. When we go into advanced settings, it's going to open up the firewall with advanced security. So inbound rules, and we see just clicking that set up 4 different inbound rules. Okay, we've got rules for another program there, rules for Outlook, a rule for Dropbox, and then you've got a bunch of default rules. Okay? The easiest way to do this is filter. I would generally filter by the profile that you're in first, then maybe filter by enabled, or you can even filter by group. And the nice thing about these group names is they're pretty straightforward. Okay, file and print sharing. I want to make sure that everything's enabled. It is in fact enabled because I'm on a private network, but that, I was able to see that. So then I can deselect that, go select something else by Microsoft Edge. Okay, that's just one that is going to allow the web browser. Core networking, there's a ton there related to DHCP and IPv6 router solicitations and things like that. So using the filters can help you a great deal. In here, you can create a new rule. When I create a new rule, I'm going to specify that it's based on a program or a port or predefined. So let's choose port. We'll hit next. We'll say we're going to allow TCP port 80, which is the web port, and I'm going to allow the connection, block it, or allow it if it's secure. Now, if you choose the middle option there, you are going to be forced to go actually create connection security rules and set up IPsec. Okay? And then we've got the option to choose the profile that is associated with. Let's call this test rule, inbound HTTP. Hit finish, and there we go. Okay? Outbound rules, if you've got a program that you download that needs access, it's going to pop up and tell you that it needs access. So let's, for instance, google.com/drive, and I want to download that. Okay, so we'll accept and install that. That should go pretty quickly. I'm going to go ahead and run it. This is just going to be a quick install. And then the reason I'm doing this one particularly is just I know for certain, it is a program that is going to require outbound connections. Okay? Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. Telling me it can access it. It'll open up and start synchronizing here at some point, and I'm waiting for my firewall, which doesn't appear to be going. Let's refresh this. Okay, we don't see Google Drive yet, and I think this is just taking a minute for that to actually notify me because I'm still preparing for sync. And of course, in my Google Drive, there's 60, 70 gigabytes worth of stuff. So we may have to just wait for that pop-up to happen. But as it then makes a connection, it did it for Dropbox, it did it for the Dameware that I installed. Every time it's just going to pop up a little screen over here that says, it's requesting access out. And okie dokie, well, maybe that looks like it made a liar out of me. That one didn't request it. It did not do what we thought it was going to do. So I think we should be able to find it in here or not. Let's switch back over to Control Panel and see what happened there. Windows Firewall, allow an app or feature. We'll go to change settings. And that's very strange. I wouldn't have used Google Drive if I knew it was going to do that. It looks like it just kind of bypassed and made an outbound connection, and that must be some part of the way that is set up. Because each of these other ones, I didn't manually do this. The VLC popped up and said that it needed internet access, and so it asked me to enable it. Okay, so that's what normally is going to happen. I was just trying to show that little pop-up screen. So the basic configuration in the firewall or in the firewall and control panel, and then advanced configuration using the MMC administrative snap-in.